Good morning, everyone. I'm excited and I'm thrilled to have our member meetup guest be Layla from Botany Department. It's we've talked a lot about collections and we've talked a lot of to different people about what the museum means. But Layla, thank you again for joining us. I'm excited to have you here and to hear about your story. So I Thank you again. Good morning, everyone. If you have a Q&A, if you have a question that you'd like us to ask Layla, you feel free to put it in our Q&A box, and we will add them in, sprinkle them in throughout the interview that we have right now going on. So, with that being said, Layla, I am always curious to find out the road to your current role, which is the Botany Collections Manager. Like, what's the story behind how you got involved with the museum?
Sure. How far back do you want me to go?
Oh, as much as you're willing to share, because I know all our members want to know the backstories. They
Sure.
love hearing everything about that.
I've always been fascinated with nature. So that started from a young age. I remember I grew up in the Midwest and going off in the fields and collecting bugs for middle school project where we had to display pinned bugs. And I knew going into college that I wanted to study biology, science in some way or another. I started off as pre-med, quickly realized that's not the route I wanted to go. It's a lot of these little things that had an effect. I worked in did a work study program in a plant biology lab on the college campus. And it happened to be in the same building where they had a small naturalistic collection. So it kind of resonated throughout my life that I was in this type of setting. Even though at that point I didn't know what a herbarium was. I was working in a lab for students that were growing plants or doing work like that. So I got my degree in general biology, still not kind of knowing what I wanted to do, except that I knew I wanted to do the Peace Corps. And so when I finished my degree, I ended up in El Salvador in the Peace Corps, and I worked in a national park on the top of a volcano, and they
Wow.
had a they had an orchid garden, and so my job was working with the rangers, teaching them English, and I had stuff in the community that I lived in as well. But I was just fascinated with these orchids and like the diversity and just like how beautiful they were. None of them had labels, so I was like, I'm gonna find some books and like try and ID them so that when people are walking through this little park, they might know what they are. So that's kind of where like my love of plants was really instilled in me. So when I got back after all that, I knew I wanted to go to grad school, and I ended up at SDSU, working with Mike Simpson, who's just as well known as our curator John Redman is in the plant world. And at the time, botany was a huge NSF grant, and they had a grad school intern position, and I jumped right in and got my foot in the door. I think that was almost 16 years ago. And so I've been in the department ever since, kind of figuring out my role here. And I couldn't be happier. I love it here.
That's awesome to hear. You're like at the top of the volcano saying, these orchids need labels. You know what? I'm going to take the lead on this. I'm going to go ahead and create them." That's so
Someone else
cool.
was doing it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I know one of the things that we always ask our scientists and our researchers is like the point of conservation. And a lot of times there's a moment or a story like early on, or maybe like during your time in the orchid garden, that really kind of triggered you to start thinking about conservation work or the importance behind that. Is there such a memory that you have that you were like, oh yeah, this is what I want to dedicate my life to?
It definitely had to do with working in that orchid garden, because El Salvador is so deforested, and that tiny little protected area in the national park was, I mean, I think they probably had 2% of their forests left just due to deforestation. And so just looking at it from that perspective, like these are beautiful, but they could be gone at any moment if someone comes in and decides to develop this as well. So, I mean, it built up to that. And then that's when I knew I wanted to go to grad school and be like, all right, I need to delve a little deeper into this world and see what can be done. And when I was in grad school, I worked in the herbarium at San Diego State University. And that's where I kind of got my foot into like collecting specimens and the significance of having specimens in a collection.
Well, yeah, and you bring that up, and that's a lot of times where researchers also talk about that is our collection, our vast collection that we have. And I know, like, I'm sitting in my dining table right now, but I see your background, and it's not your home background. Are you currently working right now at the behind the scenes collections area?
Yes, I am.
So
Yep,
can you share a little bit about what is behind you for the members that maybe haven't seen those files, that like cabinets that we have?
absolutely. So this is a compactor system, so my aisles can shrink and get bigger. So we have about 10 aisles of plants, and then we have stacks and folders of plants that are stored in our cabinets. We have, I think we're up to 275,000 specimens in
Wow.
our collection, in the botany collection.
Oh,
And the majority are from Southern California and Baja California, part of the mission region for the museum. And they
well,
date back to the 1870s. I have this example of an old fern collected by one of our founders, Daniel Cleveland. You can see that beautiful handwriting showing the date and the name of the species that was collected.
well, I hope somewhere in El Salvador in the orchid garden they have the samples of when you first started labeling them, just like that. You're like, this is Layla's original identification markers that we have here. I know that probably someone has it somewhere. If we could get our hands on that, we will definitely try our best, and so we could show off that work too that you brought to the science world, Layla. But you touched a little bit on collections, and right now you said that we have about 275,000 in our collection. And what is and everyone, all of our scientists and researchers talk about the importance of our collection and why is that for our region. Can you talk a little bit about that on to like the botany side of our collection and the
Sure.
importance it has and it plays a role in our region?
Yeah. So I'm sure you've heard from the other scientists that documenting specimens is just vital to knowing the natural history of our area. We can document distribution, so just where plants are found, and also changes over time. So this collection that was collected in 1870s in Sweetwater Valley, we know that it was living there in the 1870s. We could go back there and see if it's still there. Um, there's so many reasons why things might change. Could be development. Obviously, San Diego doesn't look the same as it did in the 1870s, but also there's things like climate change. So are plants having to, move up in elevation to get what they need from the environment? Or, obviously plants can't move like animals and other critters. So knowing the history of where these plants are found definitely makes it important for us. And the really interesting thing, I'm sure all the disciplines are dealing with this right now, but there's a lot of researchers using DNA, and they can get viable DNA from these old specimens. And it really helps with taxonomy. So like placing these species into distinct groups, and using the DNA from specimens dating back to the 1870s is becoming useful. Something no one would have thought of back then, and even 50 years ago, it wasn't a concept when they were collecting their specimens.
Wow. So you mean like they can go into your cabinet right now, and if something collects to it, like yeah, we want to research this a little bit more, and there is viable DNA in there that they can
Yep,
start
they just
researching.
need to take usually a piece of the leaf, a tiny little piece, and that's all they need, and they can go back to their labs and do what they do with it.
That's awesome. That's great to see because it's one of those things that yeah we always want to talk about, the importance of our collection and give everyone a little bit behind the scenes look of what happens in our research department because it is so vast and it's this big area. And I know I was getting a little excited watching you go back there and seeing your the rollers just go and compress down. And I can just imagine how many books and volumes we have in there of collections. So
Yeah,
thank you for sharing that.
and I will say too, we still do a lot of field work, and in some institutions they just don't have the capacity like they did in the old days. And we'll find new stuff to science like out in the field, but so many things that we discover are actually sitting in our cabinets. We're not even a huge collection, but when you have 275,000, our researchers' eyes aren't going over every single one of those every day, every year, every decade. So sometimes we have researchers come in and say, hey, I'm studying this group. Can I look at your specimens? We say, sure. And then they go through and say, hey, these are actually different. This little group, I'll pick out 10 or 20 and say, these are different from these. I think you have a new species sitting here because no one's described them from anywhere. And I pulled out this specimen. This isn't even that old, but this is a John Redmond collection from the late 90s. And he put a name on it when he was doing it back then. And this is from Baja in the Vizcaíno region. And he recently went back to the folder where this was found and was like, you know what, that does not match with the species description. And so they're working on naming a new species based off a specimen sitting in our collection.
Wow.
So there's, yeah, just,
Discoveries.
it's not all about exploration. It's about looking into our own collection and figuring things out too.
Wow, what an exciting story to have that take place within the walls already, not out in the field, but after the fact, after it's been collected and being able to get a little bit more and dive into that research. Thank you. That's so impressive to see and to share that with all of our members here. Is there, and you kind of talked a little bit about different people that you've come across in your path to your role, Layla. Like, what role do mentors play, and where do you see yourself in that as well? Because you've now been at the museum for 16 years. Like, how is that that role evolved from when you were looking at mentors, and now potentially, and I'm sure students are looking to you as someone that they want to follow and pursue a mentorship with you?
Yeah, so mentors play a huge role. And I was lucky and fortunate that Mike Simpson and John Redmond really just have such a passion for the local flora. And it was contagious and got me super excited about being involved in the museum. And at that point, I was working on our plant atlas project. But having someone to look up to that's just got this passion for what they do just is inspiring. And I'm not a professor, I'm not the curator, but I have kids and I love going to their school and giving presentations, and kids' faces just light up. And I had the opportunity to do a Zoom with my fourth graders son's class, and they sent me, I held up specimens in front of the Zoom and they were so excited and had all sorts of super amazing questions for kids. I mean, I was amazed. And they sent me a thank you note where each one of them had kind of drawn one of the specimens that I had shown, like with detail. So just kind of like seeing people excited about nature and what's around them. And then in my role here at the museum, we do have high school interns on a regular basis. And I get excited when they're excited about, actually being here. Of course, there's students that are doing it to fill a role. That's the reality of it. But there are people that legitimately are super excited. And, I think the interns that come here get to rotate through departments, so they get kind of a taste of what the natural history museum world is like. And I really enjoy that role, even though it's a short time with them. But just I try and give them some of the excitement that I got from Mike Simpson and John Redmond when they were teaching me the ropes.
Well, I'm sure they are receiving that. Just by hearing you share that story, I'm getting excited about it. I want to go in and start doing some internships, but I know, yeah, we're keeping those for the high school students to get them excited, to get the next generation of scientists and researchers get out there and build up that passion. So I'm sure they are getting that just by hearing you repeat that story right now, Layla. And you talked a little bit about the excitement and being excited about being at the museum. Is there a place or one thing that you would always want to highlight whenever you're either giving a tour, or if someone is visiting, say someone, a family or a friend is visiting the museum, when when we get to that point again, where is that one thing that you're going to share to that person because it's unique to the museum, it can't be found anywhere else, or it's just something important that you want to make sure that you highlight?
I definitely pull out these old specimens, just to kind of reiterate the fact that, I mean, we're not doing anything new, but it's so important to our natural world. But the things that really kind of fascinate people are like specimens of cactus, things you wouldn't even necessarily want to touch when you're out in the field. And here we can flatten it down, make it, something that we can put into the collection, and it's a research specimen that we can use. And I think also just reiterating to my family or someone who's visiting who may not have the appreciation for what we do or why we do it, and just that the data that goes along with these like pretty things glued to paper is just so important and valuable to knowing what's out there and around us.
That's great. Now, it's kind of hard to talk about where we're going without talking about where we've been in the past year. Everyone's been working from home, and we're nearing a trajectory where it's going back to being able to meet at the museum. But how has work for you changed in this past year from the restrictions and working from home? Can you share a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, yeah. This last year has been a bit of a trip. The botany department is normally hustling and bustling. I have a dedicated volunteer crew who I miss so much, that ranges between 20 and 30 volunteers a week in-house. So closing down and losing like that as a resource has been it's been a shift, but it's also been a reminder to me that my work here is never done, because even though they process several thousand specimens a year, I haven't had any of that coming through, and I have been absolutely busy the entire time. So it's one reason is because the science departments were deemed essential. So once things kind of opened up, I think last June or July, and I was able to come back into the museum, I was able to kind of catch up on stuff that really, when it is normally as busy as it is, that I might not get to. And we kind of joke when I hire a new volunteer that like we have our own kind of time spectrum here in botany. Projects either never end, or we say, oh, this is a year-long project, and 3 or 4 years later they're still working on it. I think our longest volunteer working on one project was one of our databasers, and he spent 20 years, and he helped see the completion of databasing our entire collection.
Wow.
But yeah, I was fortunate that I was able to shift, because 95% of my job is in the department. We just happened to have a grant at the time that things closed down, that we could do georeferencing from home. So we have all our data in a database, and we can use these old specimens that say Sweetwater Valley and then actually put a point on it, which gives us all sorts of uses down the road by having a geolocated point for each specimen. So that was the main thing that we took care of during total closure, and that when we weren't allowed to be even at the museum.
Yeah. Well, I can't let you go without. I don't know if you saw it on the Q&A. It's not so much a question, but Mary posted a statement, and more of praise to you, Layla. Your volunteers share your contagious love for plants. Thanks for all you do to help us. So I can't let you end without you hearing that. Mary's posted that for you.
Thank
Um,
you.
and one of the things that I enjoy hearing from our departments is a wish list. Is there a wish list that the botany department has of what yet they haven't either discovered or added to their collection? Is there something that you have, Layla, that you're like, I can't wait, or I hope that we can and fill in that blank.
So, I mean, the way things are moving right now, my goal is for us to be completely digitized in the sense that we'd have a picture of every single specimen. In the We have some grants that are helping move us along, but it's going to be a long project. But that's my wish list, because not only is it good for us, but it makes our collection available to people all over the world. And that's the main point of all the having a collection, is for people to use it. It's not just to sit here and take up space or look pretty. We want researchers using our collections. And the more images we have out there of our specimens, the more people are using it. And we definitely, that's my goal. My wish list is to have that finished, and it'll be years down the road, but it'll happen.
Nice. Yeah, I know that's always one thing that we're always looking to now is post COVID. What can we add? New work. Our work has not stopped. It's been going, and it's one of those things where I think a lot of the collection pieces, I think, has been the sense of discovery. So has there been any times when that you've been like either focused in on one thing, and then something just caught your eye because you were either out on the field and it was a new discovery for you, or it was more of a, I did not expect to find in this plant or this specimen out in this region. Has that ever happened to you, Layla?
It has, and mainly because I'm more of a novice field person. But we had a contract with the Forest Service, and I distinctly remember being up on Palomar looking for certain rare plants. And of course, I was with John Redman, who's, when you're out with him, it's like not only is he like hiking fast, but he's calling off plants or quizzing you. I prepared myself because I wanted this to be my project, and I had like a binder with the pictures of the plants that I'm looking for. And I saw one across the road, and I was like, that's the one I'm looking for, so we could document it. So it's not because I'm discovering new things, but for me, the discovery of like being able to spot something out in the field was just like really reassuring. And now it's been like 10 years since I've done regular field work, so I need to get back out there because I forget all that.
Yeah, but I think when we talked a little bit before we started the meeting, I know you talked a bit about may not necessarily have like the green thumb, but you have that native garden, and you get a lot of your field work time when you go out camping. Is there favorite spots that you like to go and hike, or is it for the pure scenery or for specimen spotting? Is there something that you can kind of share with all our members that are listening today about where you enjoy going?
Sure. um I like to just go different places in San Diego since I'm not a native to the area. So since I've lived out here for the last 16 or 17 years, I love going to like up in the lagunas because they do have a nice variety of plants that I can quiz myself on as I'm hiking along, or bore my children with as I say, this is the scientific name of this or that or the other. Uh, we're going camping in a couple of weeks up at Palomar. It's been a while since I've been up there, so I'm excited to go check out what might have changed in the last 10 years since I've surveyed it from a botanical perspective.
Ooh, that's exciting. Well,
Yes.
Layla, if you can believe it or not, our time is up. We're gonna turn it back over to Emily. But Layla, thank you again so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure hearing from you and share. And I appreciate you sharing your passion for botany and for everything that's plants in San Diego, because there is so much flora and fauna out there that still needs to be discovered or even rediscovered in the collection pieces, right?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. It was a pleasure.